got your attention now, don't I?
This is the Black Rifle Coffee Podcast.
Welcome to the Black Rifle Coffee Podcast.
Yes, I'm caffeinated. We have a special guest here today, and I am very excited, Mike. It's been a minute. We caught up recently, but we have Mike here from Sons of Liberty.
Hey, dude,
right? That's the
Sons of Liberty Gunworks.
I don't know if you guys know them, but I strongly suggest to check them out. You guys make some absolute great products. And I was trying to remember this morning, was it like 6 years ago that you gave us a tour of the shop and everything?
Yeah, you guys were like just coming on the scene, like, you know, really strong. Y'all came to visit San Antonio, and we supported one of y'all's parties, and then you came down and hung out at the shop. But we've had a really kind of similar trajectory in a sense, right? You know, we kind of started sort of around the same time, and it's been awesome to watch what y'all have done, and we're trying to chase y'all, man.
Well, I don't think it's chasing. It's, you know, teamwork makes the dream work here. Yeah. So why don't we get into like Sons of Liberty a little bit? Like, tell me, like, how did that start? Why did it start? And like, what's your goal? Because it's interesting. I think weapons manufacturers or firearms manufacturers, it's like there's a reason that they started, whether it was they couldn't get the specific platform they wanted or they want to revolutionize. Like, what made you go, you know what, I'm going to get into custom building? So
back then at that time, and it's not that long ago, but the gun industry has evolved a lot rapidly. But back then, if you wanted a high-performance rifle, you would buy it off the shelf, and then you would take it to your garage and then usually start swapping shit out and then tweaking it to make it end-user specific. You end up with a coffee can full of parts that you paid for that you'll never use. You've spent another $400 or $500 on top of that, and there you go. And I thought to myself, like, why could you not do that factory direct with professional armorers being able to, like, we'll handle the engine, right? Bolt carrier groups and buffer weights and gas ports. We handle the performance side of it, but like you handled the, you know, what color do you want? What interior? Like all the detail stuff. And so that was one of the driving forces. So I started actually doing this in my garage. This was right after the Sandy Hook, situation. There was a massive gun rush. There was parts were drying up. Then you also saw the rise of every shit peddler standing up trying to just, fill the void, right?
Yeah.
So I saw like the quality of weapons declining, the design, the demand for weapons, increasing. So I jumped in there. I started building guns in my garage for friends, for team guys, for Marines. And I got a visit from the ATF. And they were like, look, fucker, you really need to get a license. And I did. And so I stopped dabbling in the garage, started Sons of Liberty, and my partner Kyle, him and I are complete polar opposites, but that's what's made us work, I think, right?
That tends to be the best business relationships. I mean, that's when we talk about the core four. I mean, Logan and I are fairly similar, but there's drastic differences between each individual, and that's what makes the machine work. Because if everybody was like Evan, it wouldn't work. If everybody was like me, it wouldn't work. And so,
yeah, if it was up to Kyle, like, we'd be operating at like a 500% margin, but we'd have no customers. And if it was up to me, we'd been bankrupt a long time ago. I just would have given guns out to anybody that walked by.
Here you go, man, free fucking pews.
Yeah. So somewhere in the middle, it worked, and it's kind of counterintuitive. Usually, you look for people that you're similar to, but this worked because we were so different. So it's been cool.
Have you always had an interest in firearms? Like, my grandpa was the one that got me into everything. Like, he had every swinging dick firearms book that you could think of. And like, I just started fiddling through those when I was like, 8, 9, 10 years old and got into it that way. Was it?
So since I was old enough to remember, I mean, even like at 3 and 4 years old, I was reading like gun rags and stuff. Or when my dad would pick me up for his weekend, we'd have a 2-hour drive to the ranch or something. I would get a bag of jerky and a gun magazine. And so I've always had this almost obsession with guns. And whenever you're 5 and 6 years old and you're out at the ranch and it's dark, in your mind, it is completely reasonable to think that there's a lion or a bear,
or an alien. Chupacabra, dude.
Yeah, it's so weird you say that, like alien. Yeah. So in your mind, this is completely reasonable. And my dad would comfort me in the sense to say, hey, if you have a good rifle, you are by far the most dangerous thing in the woods. And it resonated with me to where I realized that you could be truly self-sufficient and you are the deadliest thing in the woods. If you have a good rifle and you know how to use it, you have nothing to be afraid of. And that kind of stuck with me my whole life. That
you're the predator, essentially.
You are. And you are, there's nothing you can't, hopefully defend yourself or at least give yourself a fighting shot.
It's funny you say that because it elicited a memory from me that I remember when we would camp because at the time our backyard, it was really small, but it was all rocks and dirt and it felt so giant, when you're 5 or 6. But my dad would actually let us go out there with my brothers and put like a little tent and campfire up. And then we could have like a Red Ryder BB gun, and that was like our protection out there, But like when you had it, you felt like you could take on the whole entire world, even though it's just the little brass BB.
I'm pretty sure my dad handed me an unloaded rifle several times, but it was like that was the original whoopee, that was the original comfort, and it just that stuck with me, and so.
That's a good T-shirt. Just a rifle and it says the original whoopee on it.
Original whoopee. and so you get. I think everybody in the gun industry at some point or was probably an end user, and then you saw a need you could feel. You saw a place to improve, right? And I believe in the incremental improvement of this platform. People ask me what I do, and if they're kind of on the anti side, I enjoy telling them that my job is to increase the lethality of weapons. But that is what you do. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, from precision, from everything as far as how the weapons platform is going to use. And I think the GWOT, and that's been the interesting thing being so involved in the gun community for, at least like the last 10 years, was the progression of firearms and kind of where the industry went based around kind of the GWOT. Because in the last 20 years, like things really fucking changed. Really changed, I think, at least with like, look at a standard AR and how long for 30 years, it was essentially the exact same thing and people were taping on flashlights or whatnot. But then as technology came in, like red dots and then like how you're like short barreled rifles. And cause you had all the CQC and CQB happening in like the more soft units during the GWOT, that it was very formative, I think, for the gun industry. And it's kind of cool to see where it's out because there's just like quite a few epic manufacturers, and you guys being one of them. And I'm just really, really trying to drive that home so I can get a rifle from you. I know you're backlog, but I really want to fucking get one from you. I'll buy it full price.
So this is one of the people romanticize the gun buying availability and stuff of the past, right? And a lot of our rights have been infringed on. There have been restrictions. There have been so on and so forth. You have the Hughes Amendment of '86, blah, 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 right? Here's what's interesting, though. I can tell you with certainty, our country has never been better armed than it is today. Okay, so while you're right that the AR-15 and the M16 platforms were available from the 60s all the way up. You could buy an M16 Colt factory machine gun, okay, for $350.
God, I wish I had a fucking time machine, man,
in
dude.
1985, you could do this, right? Here's something people don't really appreciate. From the early 1960s up until 1994, the assault weapons ban, there was probably only about 250,000 AR-15s in circulation. It was not a popular rifle. And a lot of sporting guys, thought like, hey, you only need one shot. Those were your bolt action guys, your lever. Even my dad, was not an AR fan and all that. So the AR-15 plus, you couldn't really mount optics. You had these carry handles. It was, the people look at the round as anemic, and so that gun was not popular at all. So what happens in 94, you have the ban, and then so the pre-ban guns had like this premium, but it was still a very niche market. Transferable machine guns on the registry, right? Whenever you can go buy an M60 off the shelf, there's only about 100, maybe 150,000 registered machine guns in circulation. And this was from 1934 to 1986 when you could buy.
Is that the current, that's the statistic I've heard, about 150,000 machine guns?
Yeah, which is really,
makes sense.
Which is not
pre-ban, right?
It was before the 86 Hughes Amendment, right? Yeah. So it was, I'm telling you, it was not popular. A significant amount of the machine guns on the registry were from battlefield bring home stuff, like in your sea bag, dude, like all the German stuff, a lot of the Tommy guns, believe it or not, the AK-47s that made it into the country were coming back from Vietnam. Now, what happened was in 1968, there was an amnesty where you could if you had grandpa's Tommy gun under your mattress, no questions asked, you could register it. It would be on the registry. It'd be completely legal. Okay, so
That's awesome.
That was the amnesty period, and a lot of the machine guns on the registry came from.
I'm not saying I would have registered if that was me at the time, but that's awesome that
Right,
there was
well,
you could do it.
I would say that probably maybe only 20% of the actual estimated machine guns in the country were.
Come on, dude. You're like, register with the government. You're like, no, I'm good.
I work with estates all the time when people have giant gun estates. Grandpa died and they want to liquidate this estate, and like they'll show you all these really amazing collector pieces, and then they'll whisper like, well, and then also under this floorboard, grandpa showed me once, and there it is. There's a fucking sturm.
You're very informational, and like I would love to ask you that. What like, so you're saying estate stuff, like estate planning or whatever, death in the family, grandpa has, let's just say a Tommy gun, fully automatic machine gun.
But it's not registered.
What happens? Like, is it like, God, like, that you're involved, like, how does the ATF look at that?
I'm going to say this very, very clearly. I have never even seen anything like that. But if I had, OJ, if I did it.
If I did,
I would tell you to just put that floorboard back. Okay, and not say a word, because
But how does the ATF look at it?
The ATF would look at that as an unregistered machine gun. They would take it from you, they would bandsaw it, and they would end up in a scrap heap. Just like there was a gun buyback dude in California where they were giving out like $100 Chili's gift card or something. And someone turned in an original Sturm 44, right? I mean, something that belongs in a fucking museum.
Right.
And they gave them their $100 Chili's gift card and they bandsawed it, right? There's no way to get a machine gun that is not on the registry currently onto the registry. Now, there's a lot of people that have this hope that they may one day open up a second amnesty. Now, if that happens, you could maybe register that thing, because it really is it's amnesty. It's the amnesty box. There's no questions asked.
Right.
Believe it or not, you know who fights against the second amnesty the most?
Yeah.
Your fucking machine gun collectors that know that it would devalue their collection.
Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that.
Because
I mean, it's supply versus demand, if a lot of people don't know that. I mean, you have, like you said, let's say 150,000 machine guns. The population increases over since 1986, and it's just supply versus demand. So if you want to obtain a transferable machine gun without an SOT, well, it's an SOT either way, but like obviously transferable. We're looking like
Form 4,
tens of thousands. Most like some of these like M60s and that are going for $800,000. Like it is fucking crazy.
An MP5, like an MP5 that's transferable right now, like an SD
50,000. Yeah.
And by the way, whenever I started,
I don't like MP5s that enough to ever try to play them.
Well, no, I mean, I have vaults full of them that we take in that are post samples,
Right.
So to me, like the novelty's kind of worn off. But people do, buy these things as investments. But believe it or not, it's also that same, kind of very niche NFA group that is trying to restrict repealing the Hughes Amendment to where we could manufacture new machine guns for civilian ownership, right? So we're fighting against our own people, are the niche people that have a ton of money invested in these machine guns. They're the ones that want to restrict, everybody from being able to have a machine gun. So it's kind of funny. The gun community in many different aspects eats their own all the time, and this kind of counter to
Really?
You might assume. Yeah. It's
you
fun.
don't say.
Yeah. But,
Crazy.
Sorry, I went off on a tangent there. Going back to what you were originally talking about, where we kind of were going, the AR-15 was not a popular gun at all, right? So from the 1960s to the 1994 ban, there was probably 250,000 AR-15s in circulation, somewhere around there. Right now, currently, like Anderson Manufacturing, I'm just using them as an example. I mean, we have a very different approach to the gun, but they make about 1.5 million receivers a year.
Wow.
That's one company in 1 year making more fucking guns than the entire gun industry produced of that platform in 30 years.
Wow.
So I would argue that our country is way more armed with defensive style weapons than we ever have been, despite
I think
some of the changes.
It's kind of where I hang my hat on, Sterling. But with Black Rifle Coffee, it was, we helped, I believe, truly normalize the SBR and the Black Rifle. I truly believe that, and I'll hang my hat on that, even if people disagree. But I'm that way. Like I grew up, my dad had an M16 and everything else was lever action and pump gauge, 12 gauge. And I'm like, I think a true American, you got a shotgun and an AR. Like that's a good start to having a home defense system and being able to like use it as sporting or however else you want to use it. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you today was just basically like you kind of started touching on just like, you know, where we're sitting at presently with Second Amendment rights and where it's been in the past. Like, I think that we kind of naturally have this tendency to think that everything's worse now than it was in the past. But where do we, in your opinion, where do we kind of sit?
So
currently?
that's it. Yeah. So it's like any complex, nuanced answer, dude, you know, it's this. So we've taken a ton of ground. Okay. I'll use Texas permitless carry as an example, right? And I'm not going to get political, but there is an aspect to it. Had Trump have won the election, I promise you that permitless carry in Texas would not have passed. Okay, because
constitutional carry, or
constitutional carry, permitless carry, right? I don't think it would have passed because things would have just stayed kind of status quo. But because Biden won the election, this was a chance for Texas lawmakers to be anti-Biden. Like right now, if I wanted to sponsor a bill that like made machine guns legal in vending machines, I bet I could find somebody to bring it before the House, only because that would be. Like
I wanted that to be a shirt. It just says vending machine gun vending machine. And it's just a bunch of fucking saws and 240s.
Somebody would bring that before the House, only because it's like the most anti-Biden thing I've ever heard. So in many states right now, I think. In 20-something states, permitless carry has passed. Georgia right now is about to do it.
Yeah.
Texas passed a law that's mostly symbolic, but it sets the tone for how Texas feels about NFAs. They're this made in Texas law where if a suppressor's made here, then it's not subject to the NFA, which has to do with interstate commerce, right?
Yeah.
With tax.
Can we peel that back a little bit? Because it's interesting because, you know, our Black Rifle Coffee here in Bernie, Texas is co-located with Montequema Firearms. Mason, who owns a good dude, man. He's a solid kid, got a good head and a shoulder, and he's going to do some good things in life. And it's interesting because, you know, I go down in the shop once in a while and I have these all the time people come in and be like, I can just buy a suppressor now because, you know, it's legal state. I'm like, no, because didn't it happen? Do you know back in the day in another state, it was like
Kansas.
Was it Kansas? But then the federal government came in and like locked up a bunch of people, right?
So there was two guys, they went to like an Army surplus store. They bought one of these made in Kansas suppressors because they passed a very similar law. And, you know, it did not work out for them. Right. So the way the law is actually written basically says that Texas law enforcement agencies cannot assist the federal government in making an arrest for a can made in Texas.
Right.
That does not say that the sheriff's department's not going to show up and like assist you in your standoff. They're not. I mean, they might not help you kick. They're not going to help them kick the door in, but they're also not going to arrest the feds coming up your driveway. Right.
Right.
So this law has no real teeth. Now, I think it's important the law exists. Number one, it does set the tone for how Texas feels about this stuff. Sometimes that tone is important, okay? And enough states are passing very similar laws to where you might be able to bring this thing before the Supreme Court and you might be able to challenge the NFA in general. First of all, there have been reasonable challenges to the NFA. Like Montana has a Firearms Freedom Act that if the gun is manufactured in Montana for your own personal use, it should not be subject to any type of interstate commerce law because it's not being sold or transported across state lines, which is very reasonable.
Very reasonable.
Very reasonable. In the law, believe it or not, that they cite, you'll love this, the law that they cite to oppose that position has to do with personally grown marijuana. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. And they use that saying, well, just because you personally grow this marijuana for your own consumption, it's still subject to federal regulation or federal law and so on and so forth.
Right.
Again, if you look at how a lot of these laws exist, the government has created a problem and they created a solution to that problem. And the solution itself is probably worse than the problem. And then it's this circular. I mean, that's how the NFA exists to begin with. The NFA exists.
How did it get started?
The NFA of 1934 exists because of the rise in crime during Prohibition, right? So you had, you attacked a product, never once addressed demand, which was alcohol.
Yep.
Okay. You had organizations standing up to continue to supply alcohol. That created its own drug war, if you will, the original, the original war on drugs. And because of the crime you saw in that period, they wanted to go after concealable guns. They were actually trying to go after handguns. Okay. Handguns eventually got exempted from the NFA, but that's where you have short barrel shotgun and short barrel rifle laws, because they figured if they could ban handguns, people would circumvent that by cutting the barrels down on rifles and shotguns. Rifles and shotguns stayed on the NFA, and pistols got exempted. What's interesting is a rifle in 1934 had to be at least 18 inches. It was soon amended to where rimfire rifles could be 16 inches. And then it wasn't until 1960 that centerfire rifles could be 16 inches. I mean, people think they know the history of the NFA, but it's really interesting how that stuff happened. But again, the NFA is a direct result of a terrible idea called prohibition.
Yes.
And so they create this problem and they try to solve this problem.
It's like
with more
my
terrible
living
ideas.
fucking nightmares when someone's trying to take away my booze and my guns. Remember, kids, never trust your government. Yeah.
No, it's very true. I mean, it never stops.
And I think, and that's part of it. And I have a question, but a little quick statement is like, I see so much problem in the government, well, obviously, but like the people that are anti-firearm, they're fucking idiots that they've never shot a gun before. And so like, they've never even held a firearm in their life for the most part. And then they're going to go up and stand on a fucking pedestal and tell the American public why we shouldn't have these things. Like, the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. But the question for you is, we talk about NFA and stuff. Do you feel that like our community is making some headway on suppressors? Because it's what the National Hearing Act?
Is it Hearing Protection Act?
Hearing Protection Act, excuse me, yeah.
Here's a fact. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Don't worry. I'm not going to fasten the chin strap on my fucking tinfoil helmet.
Hey.
Did you know that the bill to take suppressors off the registry, the day that it was going to vote, the night before was the Vegas shooting. So the Vegas
I remember that clearly.
Happened the night before the Hearing Protection Act was going before the floor
with suppressors.
Vote. And I think there was a chance to get that only because that's one of those things that kind of flies under the radar. Like most lawmakers are so detached from actual gun law that they don't realize that's even a thing, you know? There might have been a chance there. I know that nobody wanted to touch that with a 10-foot pole after the biggest mass shooting in history 12 hours earlier.
Absolutely tragic.
Yeah. Tragic, terrible timing.
Weird timing, right? And then that one was weird too, because anybody that wanted to really learn about what happened, who was involved, the who, what, why, when, where, information was really hard to get on that. Like, and that like,
I'm teaching the Las Vegas Metro PD an armorer's course here in a couple of days. And like, I have some friends out there, and it's understood that if you even ask, like, dude, so what happened? It's one of those things. It's just, you just don't talk about. The guy's hard drive's missing. The dude's, I mean, there's no motives ever been established. I mean, I'm again not a conspiracy theorist, but I'll tell you this: that thing disappeared from the news cycle like a fart in the wind, dude.
Like a fart in the wind, dude. Yeah. And don't worry about, we're not, here to inform necessarily. We're just an internet comedian that, is a copy.
It is a big part of the history of the last 20 years. And I don't ever remember any of the findings from what happened, like being presented to the public whatsoever.
There's been
not that they have to necessarily, but like there was never any closure.
This guy was apolitical. He had no strong political ideology. He had no strong religious ideology. This guy had money. This guy had, all intents and purposes, a pretty normal life. So what makes somebody go off the farm? You would think that it'd be a really interesting question to answer is what this dude's motive was, because I study mass shootings. Okay, I'm in this business, and when something terrible happens, some high profile gun scenario, my first prayer is please don't let that be one of mine. Okay, and then you start going down the hierarchy of like, okay, how fucked are we all? And that sounds kind of insensitive, but I mean they have. Unfortunately, it's not. All of these events have multiple meanings and consequences for all kinds of stuff.
It's never about the individuals. It's always about the weapons.
The gun or the profile of the shooter or something. Well, I can tell you a lot about almost every high-profile mass shooter, the medications they were on, the relationship they had with their father, the run-ins with the law they had before, all of the contacts that, I can tell you almost anything you want to know about these people. When it comes to Stephen Paddock, which is the guy's name, I don't know a fucking thing about him, and nobody does.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a little weird. And mind you, this is still the deadliest mass shooting in modern history.
Yeah. Are they working back to essentially take, suppressors off NFA?
It's still a push, man. So that is still a real thing. There's we had some. It was a lost opportunity. First of all, Trump Jr., his son, is a legitimate gun fan, a legitimate shooter.
Junior's awesome, man.
He is. He follows us on Instagram. Yeah. We've talked. I know he was just at Dallas Safari. Mm-hmm. He's a big fan of guns and suppressors. I thought, man, that would be a really good shot to kind of get some momentum there. I think that perhaps in the next election cycle, you're going to see a little bit of a tiny, minute shift in representation at the federal level, and maybe we'll have a second shot at it.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Well, it's so interesting how pop culture, Hollywood has been the defining resource for the majority of left-leaning anti-gun people. And that is their essentially asset to define what these systems and what they do, meaning specifically a suppressor. They watch James Bond or, name the flick, and it's
a very unrealistic expectation.
Suppressors are for noise management, recoil management, and there's so much more to them, and it's so frustrating when I hear and talk to people about it. They're like, "Oh, so you can just shoot someone in broad day and you would never see it?" You're like, you're just making a fucking stupid scenario that it has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of the laws and it's like anything. I mean, again, I'm not. If you look at currently what's going on, I mean, you have people that are not scientists driving the medical conversation.
People are listening to Tony Fauci. That's why we're fucked up right now. Let's just say it. And
when this whole fucking pandemic started, after we started to learn a little bit more about it, the one silver lining I was kind of hoping for was that a lot more industries would start to see the frustration that we have in the gun industry, right? Because we've been dealing with manipulated statistics for years. We've been dealing with misinformation and we've exaggerated death counts and blah, blah, blah. So we've been dealing with this for a long time. And so when I saw my friends that are tattoo artists and bar owners and restaurant owners and, gym owners, I'm like, welcome to the party, pal.
Dude, that's a really interesting parallel because if you look at the statistics that came out as far as hospitalizations with children with COVID and then how all the stuff they're saying, even the deaths now, the CDC came up and said 75% of them at least have 4 or more comorbidities. So all of that, but it's very relevant to the statistic that has been driving in the news that over 30,000 deaths a year from firearms. And you're
60,000, yeah.
And you're like, whoa, let's look at the line items, bro. Yeah, it'd be like looking at a P&L that just said, we spent this. And you're like, okay, but
let's unpack that
a little bit. Oh, that's interesting. We're in, gang violence and all these other things. And
here's a statistic that doesn't get talked about a lot, and I find this interesting.
Psst. Caleb, did you know with Black Rifle Coffee's Coffee Club subscription, you can get fresh coffee shipped to you every month? What? You don't even have to go to the store. Whoa. You don't even have to leave your bed.
What? Wow. How did you get in here? You might want to go ahead and join the Black Rifle Coffee Club subscription before one of these guys shows up at your place.
So, since we've been collecting data on this since about 1908, the number of negligent firearm deaths is lower than it has ever been. I'm not talking per capita. I'm talking just straight up numerically, despite the fact that the population has exploded since 1908, that gun ownership has exploded since 1908, the number of people accidentally killing themselves or others with guns is lower than it has ever been. Okay? Do you know why? It's not because of gun storage laws. It's not because of any of that. It's because if you were to get on Instagram right now and post a picture of you holding a gun with your finger on the fucking trigger,
you're
going to get shamed by 10,000 people. You're going to get shamed into gun safety. Our side has policed that whole fucking thing. Like, if you're unsafe with guns, you are rightfully shamed by our culture.
Yeah, unless you're Eric Bana.
I mean, I always love that one, like the gun bunnies, and believe me, I have plenty of friends. I have plenty of friends that I guess are technically considered gun bunnies, and I'm all about it because I like tits and guns. But it's always funny when you read a comment. It's like, nice tits, but that trigger discipline, though. You know?
It's become a thing within our culture. Like, oh, that trigger discipline is so sexy over there.
Well, I've always wanted to do a skit where it's like we keep trying to like shoot a gun on like a video, and they're like, "Stop, fuck, dude, trigger discipline." But I'm like, "Well, I gotta pull a trigger for it to go bang." Like, no, not for recording.
No, but not on camera.
not on camera. Don't you dare.
But our culture has I think shamed people into more safe gun handling. So there's no other way to explain why, a geometric growth in population, a geometric growth in gun ownership, yet less negligent firearm deaths, unless you're fucking Alec Baldwin, than ever before.
Yeah.
Okay? That's our side,
Yeah, but if you're Alec Baldwin, you can just blame everybody else and have no personal self-responsibility.
It just went off.
Yeah, it just went off. It's just a single action revolver that when you happen to have the depressed finger on your trigger and then you cock the action back and it hits the fire, oh my God, it goes off.
Yeah, I mean, what do I know? I mean, I travel the country teaching people the mechanics of weapons and certify government agencies on it, but I can't explain the whole "it just went off" thing. Nobody in my field, can. But what's unfortunate, though, is the people that he's talking to that have absolutely zero mechanical understanding of the gun. It's very plausible a gun can just go off.
About the only time I would say there's a decent probability for a gun just to go off would be like a Ranger School saw that has seen about 20 million rounds through it. And then you just slam the buttstock and, the little sear just slips and it goes chung chung. That's about the only time like shit just goes off.
Yeah, or I have seen like the Uncle Cletus trigger jobs, right? Where everybody has an uncle that was a sniper in NAM, and he is going to
file that trigger
down for you, dude, and like, fuck all that specific geometry that makes the weapon drop safe. Like Cletus got it, and no, it gets exciting. But yeah, dude, I mean...
I love that. It's Cletus Gunworks. It's just like, hell, it's the best trigger ever. Just don't sneeze it or don't drop it, and you're going to be all right.
Yeah. In our armor school, now take out your Dremels.
Take out the Dremels. Yeah, I really hope with the suppressor stuff, man. It's like, and even like it's interesting that as a society, we haven't like reflected on the reasons, like you just getting in the history of the NFA and stuff, like very interesting. Like, but we haven't come back and looked at it and be like, what's appropriate for the times now? And it's like, that's the thing with the government. If they take any power, they'll never give it back, right? And I think all of us are understanding that very significantly, the American public with COVID and everything that's happened with lockdowns and then pushing mandatory vaccines and all this fucking insane shit, which is a whole other conversation, but like...
You're watching the blueprint being written on how they're going to address everything from now on, right? I mean, at some point, they've tried this before, but now they have the precedent. Guns very well could be a public health issue. And you see now what they do with public health issues.
And they've been trying to do it for so long with mass hysteria around it being like the freaking senator, name the politician holding the gun saying a ghost gun, it shoots laser guided death bullets that vaporize planes. And you're just like, that should be fucking illegal. Like that motherfucker should get fucking fired immediately nor ever let to talk about firearms, because we need to listen to subject matter experts and like the community should speak for itself. But we're silenced, right?
If you notice, every time there's some kind of high profile gun incident, not once have I ever seen anybody from the weapons industry, manufacturers, armor, I've never seen anybody be asked to contribute to a news story, even like on Fox and shit. Like they don't ever, like if there was a plane crash, I bet you'd have a pilot. I bet you they'd have a pilot, like, our aviation consultant.
Or like a Boeing engineer that built the 747 that crashed. Like,
right. You would have somebody in there that has some level of actual empirical knowledge on something, but you never see that. You really don't. And I mean, even a lot of our gun personalities, people that I like a lot, that do a lot to advance the cause, I think, some folks I think could be spun up a little bit on how to, not just the raw aspect of it, but also just kind of breaking down this stuff for easily digestible information, right? Because the cure for bad information is just good information, more information. So I think the more good information we put out there, I think good ideas will ultimately prevail. That's why a lot of celebrities, we work with these guys. I'm proud to give these dudes guns. I'm proud to see guns becoming a little bit more mainstream, less taboo, because policy is downstream from culture, dude. Which you guys, you guys have done so fucking much to normalize the culture of guns, dude. You have, and I'm grateful for that, because not everybody agrees with everybody on fucking everything, dude. Okay, but I can tell you this. Seeing Black Rifle Coffee, like as you drive by, like next to a Starbucks, dude, or seeing that alternative, or seeing the shirt, seeing that thing, you are impacting policy. It might, you might not see it yet, but you are. You're making it less taboo. I remember there was a period of time after Sandy Hook to where there was DARE programs in school. That, remember the old drug DARE program?
Yeah. The red text DARE.
Yeah.
We actually did a Black Rifle Coffee shirt that said slam coffee, not speed. DARE.
Yeah.
Or BRCC.
And it was always like this.
This is your brain on drugs and crack egg.
There were programs like that for guns where, like, a gun owner was like some ominous figure, turn your neighbors in, this kind of thing. There was a city in New York that their paper got a hold of every registered gun owner in their county and published their addresses.
What the fuck?
So being a gun owner in and of itself became taboo. You had to hide this. To this day, man, I have a lot of high profile clients, athletes, musicians, actors, like celebrities that buy a lot of guns from me. And then I see them on, like some kind of anti-gun thing, and I'll text them and be like, dude, what the fuck?
We did a bit called Coming Out as a Conservative a few years ago.
I love that one.
And it was good.
That was so good.
But the reason like that we created that was because at the time we were doing some like interfacing with some people in Los Angeles, and like, we were always like the weird, like tattooed former mill guys that like are gun owners. But we'd have people come up to us and be like, hey, dude, just so you know, man, I love your guys' content, and I got a Glock 43 at my house or whatever, but I can't say that. And that was what it was based off of, because it was like someone that finally has the courage to come out and be like, I own a firearm, because the community just like, boom. And we see it's exactly what's happened with like the unvaccinated and making people look like monsters for their own individual freedom and personal choice. Like, it's disgusting. And the freedom to own a firearm to me is the freedom to like be responsible for your own safety. Like, and I've said this over the years, but like, I'm a 215 pound guy. I fought most of my life. I had a violent profession pretty much my whole life. Like, I'm pretty good. I can fuck up most people. I carry a gun almost everywhere I go. Because not only for my personal safety, but it's for the public safety. Like, it is my obligation with my history and my training and how competent I am with a firearm to carry one. In the awkward chance that something happens and someone might be a victim, I'm the guy. Like, that's my obligation that I hold to myself. Like, I'm the guy, because, and it's freeing to know that you have that,
Yeah, absolutely. I feel, dude, I feel naked, when I'm not, when I'm not carrying. I know that, like, whenever you find yourself like kind of in a, if you have situational awareness, and you can kind of, you realize you've walked into a scenario where things are a little, a little. Yeah. I'm at a gas station in a weird side of town. They can tell like I've just walked into a drug deal. I'm like, I could probably get out of here though. I can get back to my car.
It might get a little messy. Might be missing an arm after this, but I can maybe get out of here.
But dude, like veterans, like guys who are used to carrying a firearm for a living, and then they get put into this new environment. And like, I remember this dude from my unit called me, and he was like, hey man, I'm not carrying my pistol into the shopping mart or the grocery store because it's like, you can't take your firearms in there, but like, I'm having panic attacks because I need it to defend myself. And that's just the way I am.
Dude, that's a good analogy, is like, for most military guys, especially that went forward, like, it's like a kid in their blankie. They have to have it. Like
the original
you sleep with it because you're on a fob that might get fucking raided in the middle of the night by freaking insurgents.
Yeah. Here's an interesting statistic, and this is true. In mass shootings, okay, there's a math to it, and it was roughly about 6 lives a minute. Okay? So for every minute that an active shooter is unopposed, you're talking about like probably roughly about 6 lives. Okay? The active shootings fucking stop the moment the second gun shows up. The moment that the second, now whether that's a concealed carry for a civilian or the law enforcement shows up, right? But immediately they stop killing people and they either eat that fucking gun, which is totally cool with me.
Yeah, if they blow their head off, fuck yeah. Dude.
Right, which happens all the time.
Yeah, all the time.
Or they focus on, law enforcement who's there to respond, and then somebody, they end up prevailing because they're coming with, overwhelming, numbers or weapons or whatever. The point is, though, that active shooting stops the moment the second gun shows up.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you're talking about like almost a duty to carry a gun, if you're proficient in defensive shooting and you're competent with that weapon, yeah, man, it's not even about your life. It's about all of the other lives that you could save if you were to oppose that motherfucker.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like, I'm not trying to be a martyr or say anything like that, or to say and be overconfident in my skills or abilities to say that, like, yeah, could someone easily get a ricochet and hit me in the face right away? But in that scenario, like you're saying, it's a pause on the tragedy, right?
Sure.
Because it's like you're buying time to get innocent, hopefully women and children out of there and like do the right thing. And it's like, it's this whole like somebody do something, and you're like if not me, who? Like that fucking somebody's you, and that's why I think like the Second Amendment is so important.
Sure.
But I think we need to get that message out somehow to like mainstream people. I
think it's that people need to acknowledge the fact that there's still like a lot of people who want to do violence towards innocent people, and
they're opportunists.
If you don't acknowledge that, you're negating the very fact of human nature and that those things do exist. And the probability that as we have more humans, the probability increases that those things will increase as well.
Well, especially more humans that are isolated and medicated, and you're talking about, and look, so here's an interesting thing. So to me, this is the stuff that I study when I look at like gun violence and perhaps solutions to gun violence and how do you approach this? Okay, so we all know that about 65% of actual gun deaths are suicide, right? So for every time you blame that on a gun problem, you're ignoring a very real problem of depression and loneliness, the root problem of whatever causes someone to want to kill themselves. Because gun suicides represent about half of all suicides out there. So you're ignoring a very large problem by scapegoating a gun, right? The other large segment of gun deaths is in areas of extreme fucking poverty. Now think about this. Think about how hopeless and helpless and just fucked your life might be if it makes sense to you to kill somebody over $40 in a till. Okay? Like, I mean, even if you were to take the consideration of the victim completely out of the equation, you've killed someone's brother or someone's friend over $40 fucking dollars. Let's just say you took the victim out of consideration. The fact that you'd be willing to go to prison for the rest of your life, never eat a good steak, never have sex with a hot chick, the fact that you're willing to throw all your entire existence out the window over $40, how helpless and fucked must you be? So again, every time you blame the gun in that problem, you're not addressing extreme poverty, educational issues, fucking so on and so forth. So if you really unpack the gun numbers, dude, most people that end up shot probably had it coming. Okay, because if you're not involved in some kind of illegal trade or you're not involved in like some kind of gang activity, the probability of you ending up at the violent end of a gun is a bit anomalous. Okay, It's not to say that you should not be prepared for that, because there are fucking fruitcakes out there. And you will see more of that as medicated people and isolated people and dudes that,
Sure.
So anyways, but if you unpack it, there's a lot of real actual problems that manifest in gun violence, if you will. She's not addressing the root cause of any of it.
But
no one's even talking. Neither side is talking about it.
It seems like the government doesn't want to address the root cause. That they want to like have this sugar coating over the concept of what's actually happening.
Sure,
but because it's easy, right? You stand on the political pedestal, and why would you address the root issues and solve for complex problems when you can literally just go, I'm going to take your guns like Beto, like that fucking retard Beto. Like, because, you hear the crowd cheer, right? And you're just like, what? Because it's easier to do that. It has nothing to do with the public safety and public health. It's completely around a talking point to manipulate people to vote for them to increase their political stature and power. That's like, in my personal opinion, and I'm a fucking idiot, it's 100% what it is.
Listen, dude, ivermectin is not a horse drug. Okay.
Yeah.
and cloth masks don't seem to be very effective, against the spread of COVID.
How dare you?
But
How dare you say those?
I'm gonna let you go on that. Like Jared and Logan just had Peter, the doctor that was on Rogan on, and like fucking YouTube flagged it, took it down.
Sure.
Like,
we know that a lot of the behavior that we have to fucking put up with right now has no basis in reality, right? But hey, welcome to the party, pal, because this is the shit that we have been dealing with our entire careers in the gun business, because you know what? A flash hider does not make the weapon inherently more dangerous. If you were to lop off a 1/4 inch of barrel steel, okay, you have not made the weapon inherently more dangerous.
You actually kind of made it less accurate, but whatever.
I'm just saying though, I think a 15.5 inch rifle is no more dangerous than a 16-inch rifle, but one of them will put your ass in prison, right? So you start getting into some arbitrary, stupid shit.
Yeah.
Okay, and here we go. And so, but you're finally seeing it manifest on a massive scale with this COVID shit. I'm hoping that people that kind of accepted the government narrative before on guns, they're starting to question the government narrative now on fucking everything. I'm really hoping that that's the end result of this. If that's the case, maybe something good can come out of this fucking disaster, okay?
Yeah.
Well, and I think a lot of people that they don't really realize how confusing a lot of this like legislation that gets passed, because it's not, there's like you have to go looking for it. For instance, like I've had friends over COVID that like bought a AR pistol, right?
Right.
And they're like, dope. What do you think about like a Troy foregrip for it? And I'm like, you're a felon, dude. If you put that on, they're like, what? Because they're new to the firearm space.
Sure.
And it's like, because that makes it an SBR and it's considered a pistol. It's just like, it's
any other weapon.
There's a lot of confusing stuff in there that like the average gun owner, there's not a resource for it. And half of the people that are trying to pass stuff, they don't even know what they're doing. And it's...
Neither do law enforcement, neither do defense attorneys. I have to do consulting for defense attorneys when it gets into really nuanced area of gun law, because they understand things like felon in possession. They understand things like in the commission of a crime, those kinds of crimes involving guns. But when it comes to like the overall length is greater than 26 inches, okay, they don't. And it's very fucking gray. And what's even funnier is that like what is a felony is no longer a felony if you have $200. Like you would think like, like, can you imagine any apply?
That's really funny if you put it that way.
If you apply it to any other crime, right? Like, you know, like, dude, I murdered Bob last night, but here's $200. I'm like, oh, well, that's no longer murder. You're good. You know, like if you were to apply that stupid shit, like to any other actual crime that's involving a real victim, you'd realize it's bullshit.
I was going to say, a deer reel victims, that plays in the deer industry. Like, you can't go shoot a whitetail without a hunting license or tag. You pay $60. You're like, dun, 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 dun. I got 9.
Yeah, man. If you build it, they will come. And by they, I mean, some government agency with their fucking hand out. So doesn't matter if you open a restaurant, you're paying the health department. Anyways, there's a lot of useless bureaucracy, and I just hope that this whole thing is waking people up to it. Like if you're owning a restaurant, maybe the health department, who started with some kind of good intention, they're the ones closing you down because of a mask mandate. Maybe you should question that.
Yeah. What has been, so Ray, I'm just going to segue Sally here.
Good.
What is your favorite gun you've ever built? Do you have one that's just like your pride and joy? Because I have I have an AR that I built that's just like, that's daddy's gun. Like, I only get to shoot it. It sits by my bed, and then I have my one guitar. Is there one that you personally built? You're like, this is fucking.
Yeah, I have sentimental attachments to certain guns, man. That and then there are like out of all of the different guns that we offer, there are a few that if the aliens fucking landed tomorrow, I know which one of those I would reach for. And it's not because, everything we build is very reliable, okay? Everything we build is meant for endurance. Everything we build is meant to work. There are certain platforms, there are certain configurations of those guns that I promise you will push further than the other ones simply because of dwell time or gassing or understanding the mechanics. In other words, if you were to put two guns in a fixture and there was some way to infinitely pull the trigger until one of them just stopped shooting,
right,
I can tell you before the experiment starts which one's going to go further based on dwell time and gassing and just the mechanics of that particular gun.
Sure.
So, I have my favorites.
And will you make sure you don't just start shooting at the aliens because they might have sex first? They might want to have sex with us, telepathic blowjobs. Think about it. Let's hold on the arsenal before we know they're going to shoot at us.
I'm willing to wait it out for that.
And if they can bend gravity to get to us that fast, we're already fucked. They're just going to vaporize us. So there's really no.
Wow, you kind of you opened my brain up to whole new things there.
The telepathic blowjobs?
Telepathic blowjobs.
Dude,
wow.
Think about it. It's
fire.
like VR, but reality.
I'll hold fire, look.
No, because they can, in my fake universe that I'm creating, they're in a different dimension. They're multi-dimensional. And so they can get inside you and just press the little spine button. Because that's all it is. It's a neurological response to how we're built to, Yeah.
There was a woman who had some really serious chronic pain, and they put some fucking electrode in her brain, and they allowed her to push a button that would give herself an orgasm every time she was feeling this chronic pain, and that they were trying to use orgasms to treat pain. This is a real experiment. You can go look this up. Anyways, this chick was having 10,000 orgasms a day.
Wow.
And then she went through, they removed it, and she basically wanted to die. So if somebody had a button that I could push and just fucking orgasm
I'm going to start using that with my wife too. Oh man, my shoulder hurts. Looks like I need the blowy.
Talk about chasing the dragon, man. Jesus, 10,000 orgasms.
Oh yeah, you could look. It's kind of a fascinating experiment. I started thinking to myself, what if I was but
that's how humanity is going to go. It's like Elon Musk's mission to with the Neuralink to essentially, as they stated, was to help people that are quadriplegic out and give them, essentially a way of fixing.
These are the noble causes.
The noble causes of spine. And in the back door is
it's absolutely going there.
Bob gave the gorilla an orgasm, and there's a whole little IT section there that it's just the course of humanity. We do things in the nature of good, but then we hijack them and make them for pleasure.
I believe we're 5 to 10 years away. 5 to 10 years away from putting on a fucking helmet and sitting on your couch and that being the end of your real life. Because in the metaverse, in the metaverse, your avatar is a 6'2" built, fucking good-looking dude, and everybody in the metaverse is whatever their avatar, whatever the avatar wants it to be, and then you go out there, and the moment you can plug in some sort of sensory information to this helmet, like an orgasm, dude, or whatever,
it's a game.
No one's leaving their couch again because you can be whoever you want to be in this fucking fake world, and everybody would, I guarantee, prefer to be there. Okay, everybody who doesn't have a fucking somewhat of a rewarding real life, which sadly is a lot of fucking people. I see it because I look at the misery on the internet. Every time I read a negative comment, every time I read somebody just show up out of the blue and just say something fucking hurtful and shitty, I'll go look at their profile. I don't get angry anymore. I feel sorry for these people because happy people don't do that. Confident, happy people that are out meeting hot chicks, they don't come drive by and shit on you. So I look at all the misery on there. I guarantee you those people will plug into this fucking thing, dude, and that will be the end of it.
Well, I think maybe it's a good thing because maybe that will all the trolls just go into the metaverse.
I think there's two conversations there. The first one is a lot of the haters, because I've been on the internet for a very long time, and I don't know if people know this, but before even recent things, I've been so raked across the coals from the left my whole entire life, because
I get raked across the coals from everyone.
Go read the comments on gun owner versus liberal that I did, the rap battle. Oh man, because that went viral on the left side, and it's tasty, right? But I think a lot of that, what has happened is controversy has become currency. What I mean by that is people tend to want to create car crashes everywhere because they're more engaging than telling someone you love them or being supportive. And what they do with that, because it's just based off like a CPM model, like the more traffic I can get, no matter what I say, even though it's fake or anything. And we see that with politicians and everything, even in the gun, we see it everywhere.
Sure.
The most divisive, crazy thing you can say will drive the most traffic and then make the most money. That's like one. And then another thing is like on the metaverse you're talking about is like, for me, people don't really hold themselves very high. They don't have high standards for themselves. Like, and there was a guy doing a motivational speech and I love that statement about like, what is your standard? Like when you wake up, like, do you just fuck off in life all day? Like, what is your standard? But it requires work to have a high standard for yourself, to be like super fit, super successful, like all these things that you define yourself by. It's very challenging. But when you put a TV over your eyes really close, you can be whoever you want to be without
any work.
And it's easy and it's inviting, you know, like I get the allure to it, and I'm not like discrediting like the communities and like the gaming side, because I very much support them. I've been a Twitch streamer and all that, but like where it's going, to your point, I really think it's just going to be that the lazy button. Like you can do whatever you want and then you put this on and then you just live in fantasy land. And it's somewhat tragic.
I have a feeling that it will not be nearly as satisfying as the real thing, as like real accomplishment, right? To see the value of something that your work has produced, whether it's, you know, fitness, whether it's, you know, success in business, whether it's, you know, a happy, healthy relationship with the, you know, whatever. That all takes a considerable amount of work. And it's something that you work at every single day to maintain. And like, that's where that satisfaction and confidence comes from. But if you could push a button and instantly, like, you know, have a fucking giant pile of money show up, I don't think you'd enjoy it. That's why like lottery winners and stuff, or a lot of them go fucking broke, or they end up jumping off a fucking bridge, right? Because like it was this, you know, windfall of something that you've wanted, but you did absolutely nothing to get there. And there is something to be said for stepping out of your comfort zone, actually accomplishing something hard. You know, something hard. That's where the confident people you meet have usually overcome some sort of adversity and built their own path through work, through sweat equity. And that's where it comes from. Yeah. Or you can put a fucking helmet on and you're going to be a miserable guy who looks good in the meta universe.
We'll just keep running with it. I truly believe that they're like mundane is misery. Like, I tend to find that with the people that never, and it's not a criticism on them. I just don't think that they found the right perspective in life to find true happiness. And you see people that will work like the same job that they hate for 30 years. Just because they're too like scared to say fuck it, you know, and it's unfortunate. And hopefully with like social media and other businesses, there's more information that's provided to people to hopefully like pull back that trepidation a little bit and give them like the criteria for happiness. Because it's not necessarily success. Like I think the whole purpose of this life is to have fucking fun, like and enjoy yourself and be kind and good. Like
I agree.
Money can be a part of that. It opens up more doors, but like I've had some money and I've been really poor in my life. Like the circumstances didn't really change my internal happiness. It was about who I was around, what I was doing and all that.
I never used money as a metric to judge like how my life was going. To me, it was seeing the idea grow. It was the people you get to meet. It was the things you got to do. And, you know, money was a byproduct of having a good idea and being rewarded on that idea being affirmed by people, right? And then, you know, the scoreboard could potentially be money. But like, I'll tell you this, money was not the thing that, for me, had very little impact on my happiness. My happiness, I noticed dramatically, you know, increased if you were to use it as a metric. Like, you know, for me personally, like, sobriety. Okay, I had clarity. I had, you know, I was appreciating things more. Time, the understanding that time meant more. You know, being a father, that added. You know, the holidays used to depress the shit out of me, and now with kids, I'm excited about them. Like those were the metrics that I thought measured that. Sure, but anyways, dude, I one of the other things you see too is I think the traditional path to business or success or whatever it is you're going, I think that's being challenged now as well. You do look at like a college education, and I'm not knocking it if that's your path.
Hey, talk all shit you want, because I have a bachelor's degree in liberal arts from an online college, so I'm that guy.
No, but I'm saying that, like, I mean, it's like for me, I barely graduated high school. I have zero, you know, college education, and but I learned a trade that I was passionate about, and now I employ 40 dudes, and we're
you have 40 employees now. Congratulations, dude. That's freaking epic.
And we're probably the fastest growing gun company. I learned how to turn a fucking wrench, dude. And that was my path. But I look at some of this college stuff, dude, and I'll be honest, there's not many things that I can think of that have gone up in cost and down in value as much as a college degree. Yeah. Now, if you're going into STEM or something, well, it's obviously a prerequisite. But I would challenge people to ask, what their path is, dude. Sure. Is that the way to success? We talk about the guy stuck in a fucking cubicle. I promise you, that's probably not a happy dude for the most part. But he followed that traditional: go to school, go to college, get a job, middle management. Our parents and our grandparents' capitalism is over. There used to be a time when you could start in the mailroom and work your way up to the CEO of a company, right?
Very seldomly does that ever happen.
I would argue virtually never. If they need a new VP, they don't promote from within, they poach from somewhere else. And there's lateral transfers, but there's very little upward mobility. That's why I do think entrepreneur paths make a lot of sense. I think learning fucking trades, and stepping off the pavement, dude, is kind of something that should be explored quite a bit more. And hopefully it is, So.
I didn't know if you had anything, Logan. I got plenty. I've been stealing the conversation over here.
It's so good. My brain goes, it's going to happen. People are going to be checking out and going into whatever digital world that exists. We just have to accept that fact now. And what you hit the nail on the head as far as that's going to negate people from going out and being uncomfortable in the real world. And it's going to have a huge impact on our society down the road. And I don't know what that's going to be, but it makes me want to start preparing for that now. That adjustment that's going to be made over the course of the next decade.
You know what's interesting too, because you look at when people say entrepreneurs, and I'm just going to peel this onion back a little bit, right? Yeah. Because you see it all the time, right? You see the CEO or entrepreneur on the Instagram handles, but I define an entrepreneur that takes consistent calculated risks. I'm sure you know that as an entrepreneur. Sure. And for the average person, having an entrepreneurial spirit, I think is very associated with their happiness. Because if you just take one little risk a day, and I'm not saying a big one, but that shit can ounces make pounds, and it will snowball into you finding and taking a little risk and having fun and being spontaneous and enjoying yourself. It's just the people that find that comfort bubble and say, I'm going to live here for the rest of my life. No. It's the absolute worst. And
yes.
The more risk you take over life, I still have to challenge myself all the time because you get comfortable being somebody. You're you know what? I'm going to I started CrossFit 5 weeks ago, which I hate. I absolutely hate it. But I'm just I'm going to take a little risk and try something new and keep this life invigorating, or you just kind of fade away.
I believe confidence, happiness, things that are real, not momentarily fleeting stuff. But stuff that becomes part of you has everything to do with risk and everything to do with stepping out of your comfort zone, having to face failure, having to face a fear of some kind and overcoming that. That, I think, is how that stuff builds. And it's with anything. It doesn't have to be business, but asking the hot chick out, or
buying the guitar you've wanted to say you've learned for 10 years and making yourself practice 10 minutes a day.
I used to have a true phobia of getting up and talking in front of people. A true phobia. I would freeze, but I kept forcing myself to do it. Now I kind of enjoy it, and it has made, I think, a big impact in my business. But having conquered that fear makes me feel a lot better about me. Yeah.
Well, then when you get put in that circumstance, they're all right, Mike, take a stage. You're not and melt down. You're all right, I hate this, but I'm going to do it.
Yeah, but you got to fucking do it. And you had to keep facing some of those things. And that to me has really been the stuff that's made the biggest impact in my life. It's not been money. It's been stuff like that. You know? So, yeah. I think everyone should give it a shot.
I do too.
Well, on that note, Sons of Liberty Gun Works. Mike, you're absolutely amazing. Love your product. I suggest anybody, because if you listen to Black Rock Podcast, you probably like guns. Maybe go sort their catalog, check out some of the sexy things. You didn't pay me to say that, but we've been friends for a while, and it's great to kind of reconnect. And we forget we're in the same city, so we should interface a little more. And thank you very much for coming on the show.
Hey, and congrats to everything. It's amazing to see what you guys have built, man. I love it. I love it.
Thanks, man. Where can everybody find you?
So Sons Liberty, Sons Liberty GW on Instagram. We are shadow banned, so you're gonna have to actually type
the whole
Sons
thing,
of Liberty GW, and that's us. Sons Liberty Gunworks on Facebook. I'm trying to stand up other stuff like Gitter and everything else, man. But yeah, reach out, man. And we're very accessible. I mean, I put my phone number out there. People can call me and I'll talk to you about guns all fucking night, dude. So
That's awesome.
reach out.
I don't know if I follow you right now.
Wait,
I'm gonna follow you.
you got a gun hotline?
Yeah, basically, and it's me.
I know what I'm
I'm
doing
like the Miss
tonight.
Cleo of guns. So like, talk to me,
Hey,
baby.
Mike, how you doing? Just chambered.
Yes.
I'm a 1 in 9 twist right now. 300 blackout. Oh, Mike, tell me more.
1-800-operator. Oh my God, we got to do that video, man.
Yeah, I know. That's
All
a
right.
Comic-Con style. I like it. All right.
But yeah,
man,
thanks
so
a lot,
much.
Mike.
Catch you next time.
That concludes today's training. Any questions?